I used to get this quite a bit. I feel like a lot of people also get this, where they feel like they're not improving with their game. You know, like you spend a lot of time practicing, and then some days you'll play really good, some days you play really bad. Hold on, let me open up the paint. So it goes back to that thing I talked about before, the introing concept. You know, you have your A game when you play the best, your B game is when you play average, and your C game is when you play the worst. People always talk about how like they feel like they're not improving. This is when you play your best. You know, it's not going to happen as often. On average, you're going to play your B game. This is where you're like, you're not really playing your best. You're not really playing horrible, but on average, this is like kind of generally how you play. And your C game is like when you play really bad, right? What I wanted to talk about was like when it comes to tracking progress, you know, when you like compare yourself, you know, people say compare yourself to yourself. You also have to compare yourself to the right version of yourself when you're comparing yourself to yourself, if that makes sense. So like when you have this problem of like, oh, I feel like I'm not improving because some days I play really good, some days I play really bad, like I'm inconsistent. Like everyone's gonna be inconsistent to some degree. You know, everyone's gonna have their A game, B game, C game. Everyone does. And what I was gonna say is like to actually track your progress. They talk about that in the book, The Mental Game of Poker, is that if you have a good game or if you have a bad game, let's say you have a bad game, you don't want to compare your bad game to one of your good games and be like, oh, see, I'm not improving because I just played worse than I did yesterday. You want to improve your C game to your C game. So if you have a bad game, like how we just had a bad game today on that league match, horrible game, right? Lost 16-4. I don't want to compare that to a game where we won 16-2 because that's just not fair. The game we won 16-2, we were on our A game. You know, everyone's mental was good. You know, our aim was on point, shit like that, all that good stuff, right? Just not the same environment. So when you have a bad game, if to track your progress, go back to the last time you had a bad game, think about how you played and see if there's improvements. If there's improvements in the mental, if you tilted less, if you recovered from your tilt faster, that's improvement in the mental game. If you know, you fixed mistakes of like missing a smoke, or you know, you didn't miss the smoke this time, or you knew to hold this angle this time. You just want to compare each game to its counterpart from the past, right? So if you have an A game, you don't want to compare A game to C game or B game. If you have an A game today and you want to see if you're progressing, think back to the last time you had a really good game and see if you played better than that. And then if you did, then that means you're progressing. Now your interim is moving forward. This whole diagram is moving forward. If you're not familiar with the term of interim, go to my video. I think it's called like why are inconsistent or plateauing. I discussed this topic of A game, B game, C game. But this is more for like motivation and comparisons and tracking progress. What I'm talking about right now is just you want to be honest with yourself. And you want to be fair with yourself when it comes to comparisons and tracking progress. Like I said, compare each to its counterpart in the past. And when I started doing this, I'm able to recognize actual progress. And when you're able to recognize progress, that's super motivating, and it helps counteract burnout. Because if you're constantly feeling like you're not progressing, you're putting a bunch of work, bunch of work, and you feel like you're not progressing, like it seems unfair, and unfairness is a factor in burnout. So once you can actually recognize progress, you know, actually applaud yourself for even having a bad game. Like we had a bad game there, but I'm able to applaud myself because I recognize our mental, our anti-tilt, you know, our mental game during that, our ability to control our tilt was good. And some of our protocols that were problems in the past were not problems during this game today. And that was a bad game. So last time we had a bad game, we couldn't do those things too. So that just shows that's progress. See what I'm saying? It's like if you go to your Kovacs or any type of like aim trainer, not any type, but if you go to like an aim trainer, right? And it like shows that if you go to Kovacs, right, and you look at your scores will look like this. Like they'll go up and they'll go down and they'll go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. You know, they go up, you get a new PR, and the next day you get like a bad score. And you compare this to yesterday, you're like, man, I'm not improving. But you are, because now your bottom out point, your worst is now better than your previous worst. And then, you know, your best is now better than your previous best. That's the whole point of comparing A game to A game and C game to C game. You want to compare your worst to its previous worst. And this is just like kind of like how your skill will look as you improve. You're always going to have good games. You're always going to have bad games. But as long as your bad games are better than your previous bad games, you're improving. And if you can recognize improvements, recognize, you know, where you're making progress, that's incredibly motivating and it counteracts burnout.